In this clip, we're going to run through a few things to show you how to set up a list of records correctly. We're starting out on a spreadsheet that's got some sales data, and up at the top we have fields for rep, month, product, sales, cost, profit, and profit margin. So first, what I want to do is I just want to preserve this data and make sure I don't make too many mistakes to it. I'm going to right click on that, choose Move or Copy Sheet, create a copy, move this to the end of my workbook, and there I've got my second set of data. I'm going to take the original sheet, right click on that, choose Rename, and type in Original Data. With my sales data, I'll just rename that one, hit the end key, delete out the 2 at the end of it, and that becomes now my sales data. Alright, a few other things that I would like to do when I first set up a list of records is I'm going to take my field names, highlight those, click on bold, center, wrap text. Next, what I'll do is I'm going to format some of the numbers that I have on my spreadsheet. So I've got sales, cost, profit, and profit margin. Well, maybe what I'll do first is I'm going to type in a couple quick formulas. To get the profit, it's just simply the sales minus the cost. So I just typed in an equal sign, pointed to cell D2, typed in my minus sign, and then pointed to cell E2. Hit enter. I've got 16,000. The profit margin is basically how much of our profit above the cost was. So I'm going to take the profit and divide that through by my original cost, and I get 0.4706. So I like to show that as a percentage format. You can decide if you want to show a decimal point or not. I'm just going to leave it off. I want to format all of my sales and costs and profits. So I'll highlight the first 3 cells, hold my shift key down, hit the end key once to turn on the end mode indicator, and then hit my down arrow key. And that selects all the records that I have. Notice it stopped as soon as it found a blank cell. So I'm going to come just a little bit further down because I'm going to be doing totals, averages, minimums, and maximums. I want these all to be the same. Choose either a $sign format, or what I could do is I could use a currency format. Notice there's a slight difference between currency and accounting. The accounting has a fixed $sign where it's in the leftmost column. The currency format uses what's called a floating $sign. It floats to the size of the number. So for example, if you take a look at $114,000 down here in cell D21, you'll notice that the $sign is right next to that. So let's just leave this back with a fixed dollar format. Let's get rid of the 2 decimal points because we don't really need to carry it out to that. And we're all set with some of that formatting. Now I want to take my 2 formulas that I typed in and extend this series of formulas all the way down. So I'm just going to double click on the fill handle, and that copies those all the way down until there's no more records. Alright, so fairly quick ways to set that up. Alright, next what we'll do is go to the bottom of my sheet, and I want to sum up some of this data. Now the only problem that I have here is I don't know what column is what anymore. I assume that if we're familiar enough with this data, we understand that this was the sales rep, here's the month, the product, the sales, the cost, and the profits, but we can't easily see that. So I'm going to hit Control Home to take me all the way back up to cell A1, cursor down to cell A2 because I want to lock in everything that's above row number 1. And in fact, I'm also just going to put this on cell D2 just to show you how this kind of works. Click on View, click on Freeze Panes, and Freeze Panes. So what that's done, if you can kind of see it, there's kind of a light gray line that indicates where the panes have been frozen. As I scroll through my data, I can still read row number 1. I can still see those field names. If I had several other columns out here to the right, as I scroll over to the right, you can still read the leftmost columns, rep, month, and product. Well, this spreadsheet really isn't all that big. It's not all that wide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unfreeze the panes, go back to cell A2 because I really don't need anything locked to the left of this. Choose freeze panes and freeze panes again. All right, now if I hit my end key and go down, we want the totals. So I want to know what our total sales is. I can use the home key and auto sum, and it will guess at what it is that we want to sum up. So it's going to sum up everything from D2 to D26, which is fine. I could copy that formula over for the cost and profits, and then I'm going to come back up here for the profit margin and copy that down to give me kind of a weighted average profit margin that's 502,000 divided by 887. To get the average, it's equal average, and I'll sum up, or I'll average up everything from D26, and then I'm going to cursor up into my first cell, hit the end key once and my up arrow. So that's going to sum up everything from D1 to D26. It's okay to include D1 because that's a text field and it doesn't average that in. So my average sales was 57,000 and some change. Copy that over for cost and profits. Now I don't want to average the average profit margin, and I'll show you why. I'm just going to copy that over here and then change the formatting of this. When it does it, I get a different number than what the true average is, a weighted average. That's because these costs are all different, so therefore the denominator differs somewhat. So this number here, this average profit margin, really is just kind of a incorrect number, so we should probably delete that out of there. Or what we could also do is we could move this one for the total and just put that down for the average. All right, for the minimum, we'll type in equals min, come up to cell D26, cursor up a little bit, end and up. So now I've got the average of D1 to D26, copy that over. That one, it's okay to include a minimum on the profit margin. It just indicates which was the smallest one. And then finally we'll do equals max to get the maximum or the high. Shift end and up, parenthesis, and we can find out what our high sales were, what the high costs and high profits were, and finally also the high of the profit margin. So we've got a few of the summary calculations in there. That works out fairly well. All right, other things that I might want to do with this is I want to keep track of the original order of all of my records. So I'm going to right click on column A, insert a new row, type in a field name like rec number or record number. I'll use my format painter from these other fields that I had already formatted. Format that for the record number. Type in 1, 2, 3 to start a series. I'll format those with a comma format. Get rid of the decimal places. The reason I use a comma format is if by chance I would have over 999 records. In other words, if I get to 1,000 records, I want to have a comma separate out the thousands. In this case, I've got a fairly small data set, so that won't really be needed, but still, it's always nice to plan ahead. So let's double click on the fill handle, copy that series all the way down. So when I hit end and down, you can see there's my last record. I have 24 records in this data set. Hit Control Home, takes me back up to the top. Next, what I want to do is just check all my column widths. So I'm going to highlight each of the columns by clicking on the first column, hold my Shift key down, and use my right arrow key to select all those columns. I'll double click between any two of these column letters, and that should automatically adjust the column widths for me. So that looks fairly nice. Let's check on our page layout. Go to print titles. Rows to repeat at the top. It's a good idea to include row number 1, so that way if I would have multiple pages on this, it will always repeat those field names on my printout. Let's take a look at print preview. and looks like everything's pretty well set. I've got my headers and footers in from before, um, and we've already run through that several times about creating headers and footers. Right, next what I want to do is just do some quick checks with sorting. As long as you're in any one of these fields when we sort, I'm going to choose Home, Sort and Filter, and I want to sort by profit margin from largest to smallest. So sure enough, there is 148%. Down at the bottom we've got 25%, so that checks out with our minimums and maximums, so that looks good. I can sort back by doing custom sorts, and I want to take a look at this by the product. So I'll have all my buses together, all my cars together, all my trucks together. Then I need to add another level because I've got duplicates of cars, buses, and trucks. So I want to sort it by the rep that was selling these. And then finally, I'm going to add in one more sort key by the month. For product, I want that A to Z, so I need to change that. Hit OK, and we've got all my buses together, all the cars, and then down below that all the trucks. And you can see for buses I had Chris's and then Robin's, and finally we've got the month. But the problem with the month is it's got April, February, January, and March. They're sorted alphabetically. So I'm going to change my sort, go back to custom sort, and for month I want to use a custom list. And Excel already has built into it a few custom lists. So for example, here's January, February, March. It's got the month abbreviations. So I'll choose that, hit OK, and now that way for Chris's buses we've got January, February, March, and April. So it's kind of sorted correctly. Okay, a few other things that we can do with this is, now that I'm in my list of data, I'm going to choose Insert, Pivot Table. I'm going to walk through this dialog box that just kind of runs us through, what is it that you want to select? Do you want it on a new sheet? Yes, I do. So I'll hit OK. It creates a pivot table. I'm going to move that sheet to the very end of my worksheet, rename it, call it something like Pivot Summary, and try adding a field to my pivot table. So I want to know, how are we doing in terms of profit? So I click on profit. It's $502,000, so let's format that. So back to home, choose a $sign, get rid of the decimal places. That looks good. If I want to see, which rep is doing well, click on it. We've got Chris and Robin. That looks fine. And let's also throw in the product, and I'll take product and move that up to my columns. So it's just a bit of clicking and dragging, moving things around, seeing what you get for your pivot table. All right, other things that I can do with this is I want to take my pivot table and add a pivot chart to it. It guesses that I want a column chart. I can either do a clustered column, or what we could do is we could stack this. All sorts of different types of charts that you can choose. One thing I would not encourage you to do is don't do 3D charts, because it's kind of a taboo nowadays. That third dimension doesn't really add anything, as far as doesn't add more information, and in fact all it does is just kind of waste more ink on your printer. So stick to 2D charts. That'll be just fine. I'll hit OK. And we can kind of play around and see what happens with this. So for example, I'm going to take my rep, move that up to the legend, take my product, move that down to the axis category, and I can quickly switch around the way my chart looks. If I want to sort any of this information, I can click on my table. I want to sort the product sales. from largest to smallest. So that way you can see there's trucks, there's buses, there's cars. We can go back to our pivot chart, try changing the chart type to a stacked column, and that way you get a feel for who's making what percent of some of these sales. Then finally, if I don't like the orange color, if I want to change something like that, I can right click on it. I can format the data series. We can play around with all sorts of different things as far as shapes, shadows, soft edges. You can change fill colors here. So let's change the color and just take a look and see what would happen if I did just red. And then I'll close that up. Close this up. And I've got a chart set up something like that. That red's a little bit bright, but it all works. So, last thing I want to demonstrate is I'm going to go back to my sales data, and I want to show you a few things that we can do with conditional formatting. I want to highlight certain of these numbers. So for example, if my profits are over $25,000, I want to highlight those numbers. Well, what I could do is I could take my data, sort it from smallest to largest, find where any of these numbers are 25,000 or greater, and change the background color. All right, that's one solution. The only problem is it's kind of a bad solution because maybe I want to change that. I don't want it to be from 25,000 or above. I want to make it 20,000 or above. And it sure would be nice if Excel would do some of that work for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on row number 1 because I want to insert at least one row there. Actually, I need to insert at least 2 rows. The reason I need to insert 2 rows is that way I can still sort my data and it will just select out the field names. If I only insert 1 row, anything up at the top is going to get confused. It's not sure what the field names are. So for the profits, I'm going to type in $25,000. And we'll format this the same as the rest of our data. Then I'm going to choose on the Home tab, Conditional Formatting. I want to create a new rule where I only format cells that contain anything that is greater than or equal to, and I could just type in 25,000, but in this case I want to reference cell G1. So I'll click on G1 and I'll leave it with the $sign in front of the 1 because I want to always reference row number 1 on this. I'll choose Format. I want to, let's do bold italic, and let's change the fill color, and we'll make it kind of light. Let's do just kind of a light, I don't know if maybe that one will show up better, kind of that light reddish orange color. Hit OK. Hit OK, and notice that it formatted this cell with that color. I'm going to choose Format Painter and copy in my conditional format for all the profits. Let go, and there you can see all those cells that were 25,000 or greater are now highlighted. So if I change my number to 15,000, notice that it highlights everything that's over 15,000. If we try 10,000, it highlights just about all the cells. Let's change it back to 25,000. Come into my list of records, sort this from smallest to largest, and notice that those cells that were highlighted still show up because we have conditional formatting. So there's a few more ideas for you on working with lists of records. It covers a lot of material, but at least you've seen it. You can always replay this clip and see how to run through some of those steps again.